everyone. I am Tanya Janka, and I want to welcome all of you to the 9th stream for my book. So this is chapter 9, Good Habits. And so I wrote a book about application security, and it is called Alice and Bob Learn Application Security. And as you might have guessed, that's Bob, that would be Alice. And I basically, I wrote this book because I wanted more people to know about how to create secure software. You don't write a book to make money, that's for sure. But I wanted to try to share as much knowledge as I could with as many people as I could. And I was genuinely hoping that universities would consider picking it up and making a course out of it. And that it hasn't 100% worked out yet because it's like making a course for a university is a lot. You have to make agreements with each university. And so I thought about it and I'm like, I wonder what I could do to share with as many people as possible. And so I looked it all up, and I ended up deciding to just hold my own live lectures for free on the internet. Because again, I didn't do this to make money. I did this because I really wanted to help change our industry in a positive way. And so what I did was I invited other really amazing humans that I know that I like a lot. And then some of them, they said yes. And so I want to bring on some guests for this. So each month I've had guests on, and I don't know how to explain it, but when you invite other people that are extremely knowledgeable to come and share their knowledge for free, and then lots of them say yes, it feels really good. And so I'm really grateful for every single person. I should also let you know that we've had a volunteer sound and video engineer up until this one. She couldn't make it. And if Nancy's watching, I just want to say, you're the best. She set me up and did all this fancy stuff, so it looks gorgeous and amazing. And so I just want you to know there's a lot of people behind all of this, all helping me with this. So you see Tanya doing everything, but it's actually, there's like a whole team of amazing people. There's Amanda, Nancy, Tess, Mateus, Lexi, me. And today you're going to meet Ray and Erin, and Erin's kitty. I like cats. And so Erin, will you introduce your cat and yourself, and then after Ray could introduce himself?
Yeah, of course. Hi, my name is Erin Lord. I've been doing application security work for about a little over 11 years. I'm currently working at Vimeo, and I help run a blog, an application security blog called Hella Secure with Ray, and you can find it at hella-secure.com. And by the way, this is Buster. I know the last few streams I was on, I put him outside, but he gets separation anxiety, so he gets really loud. So I figured he'd actually be quieter in here than out there. So
he's such a cutie.
And now he's muted.
Bye, Buster. And hi, Kellen. Thank you for joining us. Ray, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So I'm Ray Leblanc. I am an application security architect at a healthcare company up in the Pacific Northwest. And yeah, I write for Hella Secure with Erin. That's hella-secure.com. But I've been doing AppSec as an AppSec engineer for 6 years. Before that, I was a developer on a application security tool. So
cool. I just want to say there's a person in the chat called Hella Bearded, and I have a feeling that that's Erin.
It is. That's my YouTube handle.
I love it. That's wonderful. So this month, or this show, we're going to talk about good habits. So basically, the first part of this book, so there's 3 parts. The first part is basically how to write pretty good code. How to write code secure enough to be put on the internet. Then the second part is called what you should do to create very good code. And then the third part is helpful information on how to continue to create very good code. And so there's a whole chapter, which we'll do in December, about continuous learning and like how to know that you've done enough, etc. But this specific chapter is just all about good habits. And when I was a software developer, like I didn't get a bunch of security training. I didn't know what a password manager was for the longest time. And then my team had one just so we could share passwords, not because of security, but just it was convenient to use. Do you know what I mean? And so I came up with.
Did you guys not have email? I'm just joking.
So he's joking because you should not do that. Don't send passwords over email, says the person who received a bunch of passwords over email this month. But yeah, I was wondering if we could go over like some of the things. And I think that Ray and Erin might disagree or have different opinions, which is why I invited them, right? Like if we all just agree all the time, it's not always productive. And I wanted different opinions and viewpoints. I find that personally really awesome. And so why don't we start with password managers? Like, does anyone want, Kellen says, send them over FTP. Please don't. Does anyone want to like define what a password manager is and what it does, or like why we might want one or why we might not want one?
Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Defer to Erin.
Yeah, so a password manager is essentially something that just, what it says, right? It manages passwords for you, right? So it has some kind of store of your passwords that, in general, in the way that I know it works, the one I use is that my passwords are stored somewhere in the cloud, right? Those are all encrypted because, of course, and that encryption and the key of that is actually derived from not only a secret that they own, but also from the password that you create that unlocks them, right? So you have a master password. That master password becomes part of the key that unlocks everything. And in general, they don't decrypt anywhere but the physical device, right? So it'll download the encrypted data, you unencrypt it with your master password, and then it stays unencrypted on the local device. Then the app can then fill those passwords in for you, which is nice because now it becomes a convenience feature, right? So you can have it say, fill in my password for all this stuff, and it just kind of does it for you. But that allows you then to have one master password that unlocks all of your other passwords, and all the other passwords, you don't even really have to worry what they are. So each of them can be really strong passwords. All of them are completely different, and you don't have to worry about remembering them all, right? And I've gotten comments in the past saying like, well, why would you want to put all your eggs in one basket, right? Like if that gets hacked, like what happens, right? But my response is generally like, well, what's the alternative? It's like, what else can we do other than not use passwords anymore, which is kind of where mind is going now in the future. Mm-hmm. Like I've become kind of a passwordless evangelist, but it's hard to say what that's going to look like exactly going forward. It's going to happen eventually. Yeah. We'll get away from passwords. We just don't know exactly what that looks like and how it's going to be adopted.
Yeah. Ray, do you want to add anything?
No, Erin's been using a password manager since I've known him, like 11 years now. So,
even I was like paranoid about those. I thought that was not that great of an idea, but then I got the idea from a guy I worked with, and he was one of those paranoid guys that I knew, right? So, if it came from him, I knew that like, okay, this has got to be a good idea. And as it's shown, that is just generally has been a good practice now moving forward.
I'm personally, I am bad at using my password manager. Like I keep all my passwords in there in case I forget them, but like, and any auto-generated ones. So like any of my stuff that I need to have like a lot of security for, like my bank account and stuff like that. Like I have, and my emails, like I have auto-generated passwords for, but most other things, like I don't really care about most of my social media crap. Like it's just like if someone breaks into it, like there's nothing on it. Like they can post as me. That sucks, but oh well, I'll get over it. Yeah, like I don't know. Like I don't see as most things as important. So I
Mhm.
don't really care about the security of like 90% of my web presence. But like the things that I do care about are I do use a password manager, and I keep those as secure as possible.
Why would we want an automatically generated password? I can answer this if you want, but I'm trying to lead you into. So humans suck at being random. We're so bad. So if you ask 10 people what their favorite number is, more than half will say 7. It's my favorite number. Like 1 to 10, if you ask them what number, more than half will say 7. Why? I have no idea, but apparently it's the world's favorite number.
I hate
And
the
just
number
like,
7.
well,
Awful number.
Well, you are one of those 3 in 10 that don't like it, apparently. But just like the world's favorite color is blue. So if they ask a security question, they're like, what's your favorite color? If you answer blue, apparently 70% of the time you'll be right. And so humans aren't like, we're very predictable. We're not as random as we like to think we are. And so when we come up with passwords, there's patterns that we follow, and computers are really good at guessing them. And so when you have a computer generate a random password for you, it's significantly more random than if a person does. And it also means it's unique. It means that compared to all your other passwords it's made for you and that you have, it does not match any of them. So for instance, I've been in a bunch of data breaches. So I subscribe to haveibeenpwned.com, which was created and has been maintained for a zillion years by Troy Hunt, who's my friend and I think is awesome, by the way. Hi, Troy. But anyway, I receive emails from Troy, but they're really from Have I Been Pwned? And I get sad. So whenever I like receive an email from it, I'm like, thank you, but also damn it, because it means I'm in a breach. But if that username and password don't match anywhere else, like any of your other accounts, if it's different, then you don't have to worry. Like I'm like, oh, are you gonna log into my free Adobe account? Yeah, I don't care. Or like, oh, there's that weird. I remember there's like some sports channel thing, and I don't watch sports, but I used to date someone that really liked sports. And so I had like made an account so I could watch a thing and pretend we had common interests. So that didn't work out, obviously. But anyway, it's like, oh, you're sports, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I don't care. Right. And so having unique passwords is really, really important. And like if a computer can generate them for you, they'll be way more random. And then it's like way less chance of them being guessed. Oh, there's a comment from Kellen. Also, my password manager can be set to include special characters, and it's better at putting those in than I am. It's so true. Humans tend to put periods, quotes, double quotes, and question marks, or maybe a pound sign or an exclamation mark in passwords, and they almost never use any other special characters. Like, because we're so predictable. And so then, like, for instance, the caret or the tilde sign or all that other stuff, we don't tend to use those. So then it's not in our passwords. Someone else in the chat is saying Tanya spoofing to pretend she's a sports fan. So not. Ray is saying just make all your passwords exciting by adding 4 exclamation marks on the end. So Sean in the chat is saying, I was at a medieval conference, which sounds really cool. Honestly, like that sounds kind of awesome. And a speaker said something like, I wonder how many people in this audience use Beowulf as their password. And there were a lot of sudden, very worried faces. And it's true. So many of us use like all these things. And so I'm called SheHacksPurple. And imagine if for every security question that says, what is your favorite color? I put purple, everyone would know. But instead I use a randomly generated value and then I save it into my password manager. So my favorite color is a different random value for every place that uses security questions. And someone else says, I would have used Gandalf. Oh my gosh. Oh, so what about, so one of the other things I comment in, like, besides that we shouldn't reuse passwords is like, so I think I say don't be cruel to your users. Stop password rotation now. What do you two think about, like, does anyone want to explain what password rotation is and like why it's mean?
Password rotation is awful. Like, so usually companies have like a 90-day or 1 year password rotation policy where you have to like rotate your passwords every, like my company does it every 90 days, and it is the worst thing ever. And it generally like, I think NIST calls passwords like that you remember memorize secrets, and so like it generally creates bad practices that make those memorized secrets worse because you have to change them. So like, say your favorite football team was like, or hockey team. What hockey teams are up there? Oh, I'll go with Erin with the Sharks. So his password would be like Sharks 1 exclamation point, then Sharks
Do it, really?
2 exclamation point. Sorry for revealing your password, Erin.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that something like that even happened when I was actually doing like a red team exercise before, is that we actually were able to crack some of the users' passwords. And once we informed the users that, hey, you have to reset your password because we were able to retrieve them, I think more than a couple of them just incremented a number that was at the end from like 2014 to 2015. And then we checked that again because we knew that was probably going to happen. So we just checked them all again and just made them a little bit different, or incremented it or decremented it. Or I think one said it was like a season. So it went from spring to summer.
Yeah.
Yes. The
What we have to
most
remember is that a
popular.
lot of those. Go ahead.
No, you.
I was going to say is that a lot of those popular password crackers, like John the Ripper, or is it Jack? I think it's John, right? John the Ripper and some of those password tools have techniques built into them to make guesses like that. It'll do some kind of a heuristic on it to kind of guess like permutations of what it thinks someone might change it slightly to. So you can have one password from a database dump, but you can have it do permutations on it and get like 20 additional ones based off of small changes.
Yeah. So when they do, when attackers take a whole bunch of passwords or sets of credentials that were breached on other sites, and then try them against a specific site to see if they can get in with any of those accounts, that's called a credential stuffing attack. And I coined the term where they increment them to try to see if it's, like, for perhaps right now, fall 2021. That might be a password that people are using. It's probably one of the most popular passwords right now, unfortunately.
I like to call it autumn.
Yeah, so there's like less. So autumn 2021. But like they'll do that, and then it's sort of like a rainbow credential stuffing attack. So just like rainbow tables where you just adjust it slightly, you do like this spread. So it's like Sharks 2021, and it's like, well, let's try Sharks 2022, or let's try Sharks 2020 because maybe he didn't need to update this one, right? And so we decrease, or what's the opposite of increment? Decrement. Decrement, I guess. But yeah, and yep, fall 2021 with 4 exclamation marks because your password's excited. Yeah. And this is like, and these attacks are really popular. Really, really popular. I remember in 2016, that was the first time I heard about this. And there was an attack against Alibaba, which is a huge shopping site that's not popular in North America. It's more an Asian type destination for shopping. And they tried something like millions of accounts. And they managed to get into quite a few. And they managed, I believe, to steal around $200 million worth of merchandise. And it took like minutes, right? And that so these attacks really work because of password reuse. And then I feel like, because Erin, your comments about like one day how we're going to go passwordless, it just cannot come soon enough, right? Because expecting the average user to like remember 200 passwords that are all unique and that are all strong and long is just, it's not, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm not capable of that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the problem is that just passwords at this point have become almost categorized as a weakness in and of itself. Like it's getting to that point that in the future, in your future, we'll probably call password usage in a authentication sense a weakness. I know that I know one guy I know he says that essentially passwords is a weakness to like phishing, right? So like because phishing is so easy to use to capture people's passwords because it's so easy just to create a fake login that looks real, and then people just type in whatever their password is and it's just gone. I mean, I have another story of like we had a red team come in to where I was working, and they actually set up a booth in our cafe, and they actually, I think Ray, you might remember this. I don't know if you were there at the time, but they set up they called it password strong, right? So they had people type their password into their laptop to see how strong it was, right? And they get like a strength rating back, right? And they gathered, I want to say, at least 100 passwords from the employees. And there were even some people that were like, they put in the password and it was like, oh, it's 2 weeks. So they went to the computer, changed it, came back and did it again. It's like, yeah, it's strong. Cool.
To be fair, when they had a strong password, they got a T-shirt or something.
Yeah, they're actually really efficient. They brought in merch, they brought in stickers, they were very, very clever.
Oh my gosh, that's literally so terrifying, Erin, because I know so many people that would, especially because of the social influence, I guess, the idea that it's like, well, you want to prove that your password is really good. So you're like, yeah, I'll show you. That's an interesting social engineering trick.
I would even say it's probably if you have some type of a security awareness team or some compliance team, that could even be a great to kind of again a test. Set up a website or something. Say, hey, test how strong your password is, and just point them to the site and see how many you get. I guarantee you'll probably get at least a few dozen.
Oh yeah,
depending on company size.
Well, when I was in college, I remember that there were all these booths that would be set up during like certain days of the week, and you would sign up your information, and one of the things that I would ask you for would be your social security number and like your phone number, address, all that stuff. Like basically like all the information that you'd ever want to know about a person. And then they give you like a little like foam football or a T-shirt or whatever. And it was like all like garbage, like stuff, right? But they got a bunch of awesome information, probably worth more than the 50 cents that they spent on the swag, right?
When I went, I was a speaker at RSA in 2020, right before COVID got huge. And then I ended myself in quarantine when I got back to Canada. But anyway, I went and I went up to the desk and they're like, oh, you have to just go there and like auto sign yourself in as a speaker. And I go, and then I realize that my password is 80 random characters. And I'm going to like copy it from my phone into the thing. And I was just like, no. So I just like walk up and I'm like, I use a password manager. And so like, I don't know my RSA account online password. And the lady was so annoyed with me. She's like, just go put it in. And I'm like, do you want to type this in for me? And she's like, fine, I'll just check you in. But that's the only time that I can remember in a while where having a password manager really messed me over. They looked at me like, what a princess. She doesn't want to sign herself in. I'm like, no, it's really hard. Like, I'm definitely going to make a typo in those 80 characters. I'm just like, I'm going to try like 10 times to try to sign myself in. I'm like, I have to speak in an hour. Could we get cracking? And so I guess like one comment I would want to make is if you're a software developer or an architect or a designer who's listening to this, if you can figure out a way to make your app or your system passwordless and have other things verify the user it's just so much better. When the last place where I just did dev full time, or maybe the second last place, I remember I discovered, so I felt I was a very smart dev. This was a while ago. I was like, well, if someone's already logged into their computer, then we know they're them, right? We trust at that level, and we give them access to a ton of things. Why don't we just give them access to this or that? So we changed a bunch of systems so that Active Directory would just show them or not show them. And we added role-based access control to a whole bunch of our apps. And users were pleased. I remember a manager saying to me once, like, I asked my employee to print out this report and she can't see it. Why? I'm like, she doesn't have the authority to see it. Like, she's not in your group in Active Directory. So, like, tough. And she's like, oh, you have security on it? I didn't even realize. And then I worked somewhere else as a pen tester. And I remember I was like, it's weird that if I'm doing wireless, like, they don't ask me to log into the network or anything. And it turned out, like, as soon as you walk on property and you're past the gates, there was a certificate it would verify. And it's like, if you have the password and you have a machine and you got past security, they would just let you into all the network areas you were supposed to have. And it was this huge campus. And so then you could go work in the cafeteria or wherever you wanted wirelessly. And it would just auto authorize people for all sorts of things. And I was just like, why doesn't every place do this? Like, it's just so nice. So I'm a big fan of passwordless if it's possible. And like, if devs could think outside the box a bit more or ask the security team for help, I feel like if we can make it so security controls are invisible to the user, like, that's the best one, right? Like, when that manager said to me, there's security on this report, she's like, that's actually a relief, because I was like, I can't believe she just lets anyone see this. And I'm like, yeah, that employee was on another team. So, and then they moved to her team, but in Active Directory, they haven't been moved yet. And so we'd given, like, her team access to her team's reports, which makes sense. And I said, well, you need to fix that, because I'm not going to manually program in some random person, like, follow the security protocols. And then it was fine, right? But any comments, or do you want to go on to MFA?
No.
Yeah, I think I said my piece that passwords they're over. It's over.
Who wants to talk about multi-factor authentication and, like, why it's painful but worth it?
Sure. So I mean, MFA stands for multi-factor authentication, and it's describing when you use multiple factors to identify who you are to a computer system. Those factors being something like a password, your password,
Mm-hmm.
something you have, which is like a physical device, your cell phone, a token, something that's a physical device, something you are, which are the biometrics. So also something you have. I have the facial recognition on this, thumbprint scanners, iris scanners, things like that. When you use more than one of those, that's multi-factor, right? So in sequence.
Or where you are.
Oh yeah, and sometimes where you are, because being physically located inside of like an office building might give you access to their private network, that kind of stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
The most common here is the first two, right? Something something you have. So you say put in a username, put in a password, then it's going to ask you to confirm your identity with that additional factor. So a lot of times you have, I would say the most popular, one of my favorites is using a software-based one-time password or one-time use password. So if you use like the Google Authenticator app, it will be to have a 6-digit code that changes every minute. And then you have to basically put in that code at that time to then continue with your authentication. So even if a hacker or someone had your username and password credentials to try to log in, if you have MFA turned on, they won't be able to also be able to pass what you have, because they don't have physical access to your phone or your token or whatever you may be using.
I mean, those are still vulnerable to phishing attacks, though, right?
Yeah, and they can be.
How so, Ray?
I don't know. I saw it on a Twitter thread once. So basically, like if someone gives you creates a fake phishing page, they can create a secondary fake page that's like after they harvest your username and password,
Oh yeah.
they can go in and prompt you for your one-time password from your Google Authenticator or whatever, right? So,
But
Mhm.
they
and then
only have
log in
30
and on the background.
seconds.
Yeah.
They only have
But then
30
That's all you need to
seconds.
need, because once they hit it in,
Yeah.
it's just a simple
You just
request to.
immediately send it.
Yeah, they probably have another script running that just does it automatically.
I've heard other people say, oh, well, you could do like a SIM card switching attack, like where you call someone's company and you pretend you're them and you convince them to switch your phone number to a new phone. And I'm like, if someone wants to attack me that badly, they could probably figure out where I'm going to be in person and just find me and punch me in the face, right? Like, don't do that, please, people. I like my face in one piece. I avoid violence whenever possible. But I've had people say, well, if you're using two-factor authentication, but you're using SMS, because there's a question from Ikechi, I hope I'm saying your name properly, or Ikechi, but because you could do that SIM swapping attack. And I'm like, that's not just like a phishing type of attack. That's a spear phishing. That's a specific, lots of energy, you as a specific target person type of attack. And I don't know. What do we think the odds are?
So I would say that like SMS is better than nothing, right? But like, yeah, it's not ideal, but like when you're developing a app for like, it's like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't use it for your company, right? Because you can give everyone like a YubiKey or whatever and use like WebAuthn and Fido or whatever things you want to use. I don't know. But for the general public, I mean, like, there's like, I have developers that I work with that don't have smartphones, right? They still like
Yeah.
they don't want to ever have a smartphone, so like they can't use the Google Authenticator app, right?
But you could have one of those little duo buttons where you just press it. It's just
Yeah.
like a side of your computer.
But I mean, really, you're when you're program like have a solution for like the masses, you have to like play to the lowest common denominator, and that's why 6-digit passwords are still accepted in places, and they don't really. People would rather you just log into their site and buy something than like try to stop you from like try to let you have security. Like if they're like, if someone wants a long password, they can have a long password, but if they want a 4-digit password, like that's on them, right? And like I kind of agree with that. It's like there should be more education for the general public, but like from a business point of view, it doesn't make sense to get in the way of someone buying something on your website.
Yeah. Yeah. MFA is not the most user-friendly thing in the world. It's really not.
And that even Lisa, when I was in the past, when we were trying to fight to have MFA for customers, we were fought tooth and nail to not have that because they had a very predetermined like flow when it comes to like going to the site and ending up with a purchase, right? And any change to that user story was extremely frowned upon, because it meant some percentage less of sales. And yeah, that will happen. And unfortunately, that is the truth, is that once you add more barriers to entry, you will end up with a percentage less whatever your site's doing to generate revenue. But you have to find where the trade-off is.
I first learned about, I don't remember how long ago, but in 2007, 2008, I was doing anti-terrorism activities for Canada, which obviously I can't tell you about, but I had to do 3-factor authentication to get to the top secret stuff. And I remember being like, cool. And I learned a lot about security. I also learned that my fingerprints are not as. Also, I had a 7-year-old do my nails. Don't they look great? I just noticed that on camera. I'm like, oh yeah. But I feel like that really alerted me as a software developer about that, and a sysadmin, and I was the sys network admin and database admin. And anyway, I was the everything, because there's only so many top secret cleared computer scientists out there, right? But so then, like, later on, I just started naturally using MFA everywhere, because I'm like, well, if this thing's important to me, I want to protect it. And so I remember I joined Twitter, and I don't know if you two have had this, but as a security professional who so I know I have like a zillion followers now, but then I didn't have that many, but people would sometimes challenge your security. So someone was trying to break into my Twitter account, and I live tweeted it, and I made fun of them, because I'm like that, and that's my sense of humor. I'm like, I have MFA, loser. You're never getting in. And people thought it was pretty funny. And then actually no one's tried since then, which was good. But I remember feeling like really confident and safe, because at first I saw like someone trying to log in. Is this you? Is this you? And it was not me. Right. And I'm like, no, don't let them in. No, that seems very bad. Right. And then I was like, wait, I'm totally safe. There's no way they can guess a 6-digit code that changes every 30 seconds and get it right. And so, yeah, it was fine. But I don't know. I usually tell people, if the account is important, you should turn on MFA. But otherwise, maybe accept the risk, right? Like, I don't know. I have like lots of news accounts and whatever else, and I'm like, where are they going to go read crappy articles? I don't care. Like, and then like click like on things I don't agree with. Like, what's the risk here? I'm like, I'm probably fine. There's a comment in the chat from Boxy Punk Chick. That is the best screen name ever, by the way. It's important to teach children early on about security. I noticed that elementary schools don't teach kids how to make strong passwords. Habits are forming, and it should be taught from the beginning. Oh my gosh, I agree so much. I have little humans at home, and yeah, that is definitely my intention, to have them be like little mini security privacy ninjas. Like, as they get older, they'll be like 10 and be like, actually, I have MFA on that, teacher. Yeah, I fully want to teach them all the things to protect themselves.
Yeah, I like that comment a lot too. But we also, let's be honest, there's a lot of stuff we should have been taught in school that we're never taught. It's like, like taxes and all of the stuff you actually use and actually do.
Yes.
Is like, and I think it's also a big thing that, like, as technology has developed over the last 40 years, we haven't really like tried to have any kind of mass education to like teach people like what's going on and how to like do certain things. And there's even people our age and our generation that are still like tech phobic, just because they just don't have their brain's just not wired for technology.
It's frustrating, especially. So it's funny. I tweeted something on Instagram. So I put a picture, and it had like this notification that I had a bunch of notices, but I was in my notifications and I saw them. And so I took a screenshot and then posted on Twitter. I'm like, I'm old. I don't understand. Could a millennial please explain to me what Instagram is trying to tell me? And they're like, oh, you have more than one account and your other account has notifications. And I'm like, why? Yeah. And so if I, as a computer scientist who's worked in tech for, I believe I just started my 25th year. It's like a long time, right? And I'm frustrated. I remember my dad being like, if these notifications don't stop, I'm going to break this phone into little pieces, and I know how. And I was like, yes, sir. And me and my little brother are like, off, 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 off. And then obviously I had to put a wallpaper picture of me. Because I'm like that. And I'm like this. I'm like, it's like, take that off.
That makes sense too. Well, because the Facebook, Instagram ecosystem is terrible. Like, I'll just say right now, just because, I mean, and I would say Instagram used to be much better, but once Facebook got their hands on it, it's just like
Terrible how? Be
crazy.
more specific, because I have a bunch of opinions of different ways that it's terrible.
I mean, I want to go way too off topic, but yeah, it's like even I get confused with some of the stuff that Facebook does, especially when it comes to like Facebook business stuff and pages. Like, I've tried looking through like the business Facebook admin panels, and it is so confusing. Like, you have to have entire courses to learn how to use this thing, which I don't know. Less is more in a lot of these cases.
We had a marketing, so like we keep having like sales marketing consultants that I fire. Oh, like I'm really mean. And basically he was like, okay, so we're going to do these Facebook ads. And I was like, I feel dirty, but we could consider. And then one of the steps was, okay, so now give me all of the email addresses and interests and personal information of all your customers to give to Facebook. I was like, no. No. One, GDPR. Two, like California privacy law, Canada privacy law, etc. Right? So one, breaking the law, big thumbs down. But also more like, it sounds weird, but more importantly to me, I'm like, my customers would never forgive me. I would be so furious if I was one of them. And he's like, oh, well, they won't know. I'm like, oh, well, then it's okay. It's not. So I was like, oh, no, we don't need your services. I'm good. I gotta go now. Bye. But like, yeah, so I have a lot of feelings about, and all of them are bad about Facebook. But anyway, my marketing team made me a Facebook page. And so if you want to speak to my marketing team, you can like go to Facebook and look me up. So I have more things. And so like I have like a zillion things I want to talk about in this chapter, but like time is a thing. And so I wanted to do 2 more topics. And the ones I want to do are technical debt and how it relates to security. And the other one, I want to talk about inventory of all your applications and web assets. Who wants to talk about inventory and who wants to talk about technical debt? And like, I'll just talk forever if you allow it. So you should probably interject. Ray?
I can talk on either one, I guess.
Pick one.
I have no preference.
I could probably chat about technical debt.
Okay,
I'll
take the other one.
Erin?
Yeah, so I mean, go ahead.
I feel that technical debt is security debt. I personally feel like if it is so hard to make a change in prod and you're so worried that everything's going to fall apart, to me, that's a security issue. I feel like they're really linked. But tell me what you think, and if you have any ideas of how it could be less awful.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, because especially as I've done this work more and more, it's become that more obvious that a lot of the programming basics that were taught, like on how to make code that's maintainable and code that is clean, readable, and reusable, and well commented, like all this stuff it all comes down to like a maintainable code base is a secure code base, right? All those basics, as long as you pay attention to those, still it really goes a long way. But technical debt is basically, it's like one of the symptoms of unmaintainable systems and unmaintainable code, because that's a great analogy. It's like, if it's so difficult to make these changes and get them deployed and worrying about things blowing up, then something else is going wrong elsewhere, right? And it's just a hole that's very difficult. It's easy to get into, but it's very hard to get back out once you start to accrue too much technical debt. And what I mean by technical debt is just like, little changes, little bug fixes, security fixes, things that are not features or programming work that leads directly to generating revenue, right? And that's usually why a lot of the time senior leadership tends to ignore it, because they want to focus on features that are going to actually make money or actually make the user experience better and have more people paying for the product. So it's very difficult to get senior leadership buyout on something like that. So it's really important that the CISO, CTO, and the people that actually run the tech organization actually puts like addressing technical debt as a priority, because those are changes that have to come from the top down. And I know one thing I've been doing recently to try to tackle that is to actually begin doing a kind of internal interviews with key
Nice.
people in the development structure that have some tenure and can actually speak to the technical debt that they are aware of. Like, what are the technical debt that you know of? What are the trends that you're seeing that's caused insecurities? What architectural decisions have been made that circumvent security, and try to get an idea from their perspectives, like what they think might be going wrong. And you get some really surprisingly good information from that. You probably would have, because I did that recently, and I got some information out of just one interview that just like completely changed now the priority for future projects, just from one thing that they said.
That's awesome, Erin. I like how there's kind of a happy ending to that story, because usually talking to other teams and discovering stuff, and then you're like, and then I cried. Do you know what I mean? And then I couldn't sleep for like 4 days, right? In the chat, Boxy Punk Chick says, I agree, after dealing with digital forensics, it's clear that that's a fact, like that technical debt, just, it's security debt. It really is. I consult constantly on places where they're like, how can we do DevSecOps? And then after 20 minutes of talking, I'm like, we need to do 2 things. So one, DevSecOps, like every cool new thing goes through a pipeline and security's happening and this and that. And the other half of the plan, which we need to spend at least 50% of our time and money on, is addressing our technical debt so that it's more secure. And even if I'm just buying a bunch of WAFs and running around and putting like a network segment, like a moat on the network around these I call them dumpster fires, because that's nicer than other terms I've heard.
That's nicer.
Yes, Travis McPeak taught me to say that, because I called them something worse before that. And everyone understands what you mean. And so, yeah, like I spend a lot of time talking about ways where we could just reduce harm, if that makes sense, but then make sure every cool new thing is cool, new, and secure, right?
Yeah. Another change that I've seen some people doing is that they will allocate like a percentage of time, like on their development team, like doing, say, like 1 to 2 sprints per quarter, just focusing on technical debt issues.
Yes.
Which is a great idea. And especially if the security team knows when that is, they can start to really like kind of push them with like stuff that they find, and they can even schedule like pen tests and stuff during that time for what they're focusing on to maybe even find new things. But again, that's a change that has to come from the top down. Like that's something that security themselves really can't push horizontally, right? They have to push it up to the senior leadership, and they have to push it back down to have those changes prioritized.
I find a lot of the time when I go in to consult places, I'll be talking to the security team, and they keep talking about kind of like letting the devs continue to do things that are really bad, and then we're trying to react all around them. And I'm like, no, what we need to do is talk to their management team and be like, listen, you know, your code is in SourceSafe, SVN, Turtle, GitLab, GitHub, and Bitbucket. How am I supposed to support all the stuff if it's everywhere? Can we like commit this year to trying to reduce it from, 5 or 6 to 2? And then with the goal of it eventually being 1, right? And I'm like, I can't be in charge of this all by myself. If you're not on board, like I'm screwed, right? And they're like, why do you want it code all in the same place? I'm like, let's talk. Which kind of brings me to Ray and inventory. Like, Ray, why is it important that we actually know what we have?
I guess because if you don't know what you have, you don't know what you need to defend, and you don't know what's important and what's not important.
But doesn't every single place have a perfect inventory of all their applications?
I'd probably say like 0% of every single place has a perfect inventory of what they have. I mean, that's the idea of what people want to go to. I'm sure someone's doing it right. I don't know who. I don't know anyone that is working for a company that is doing it right. I mean, I think there's various grays, like most people are just like in this gray zone of we're doing something.
Yeah. I feel like so I have a couple people that I mentor, and one of them, the past year was his first year working in industry. And he made an amazing inventory of assets of all the stuff where he works. And it's pretty darn close to complete. And like his company buys other companies, and he's been interviewing their devs and like working his butt off on this. And he's like, I can't believe they didn't have one. This has been invaluable for me completing my work, like trying to put things in pipelines. How would I be able to do it if I didn't know blah, blah, blah? And then he's like, and then we had a security incident. And then, or they did. And he like was able to use it to like pinpoint the things almost immediately, right? And he's like, how can people, and he's like, I can't believe they didn't have it. I'm like, oh, sweetheart. Most places don't have that. Like, you made an amazing thing. Like, he's like, yeah, every team keeps wanting to use it and have access to it. And apparently it's really helpful. I'm like, yeah. But his heart was broken to find out it's not common to have this perfect list. So what could we do with this list, Ray? Like, if, let's say we have a name for all of the apps, like the name of the app, a link to dev, a link to prod, any other environments, maybe a link to where the code's saved, contact information for that team, maybe what tech stack it's built in, what it sits on. So like, is it in the cloud? Is it here? Is it there? And even better, if there's any security information, right? Like, has there been scans run on it, whatever. Or if it's in a pipeline, like, where's the pipeline? What could we do with that if we had a list for every single place we work, like, or every app where we work?
I mean, just off the top of my head, if you have an internal red team or external pen testers, you can use that list to determine what to test. For incident response, you can see kind of where your blast radius is. You can do attack surface analysis with it, set up scanning, make sure like everything has like either SAST or DAST enabled. You can, I mean, possibly depending on the information, if you like, my company might have multiple environments, right? You can see what environments are, what applications are in what environments, and see where the new dev is happening and where the old dev was happening. And
Oh yeah.
like you can
And
look at trends of, I mean, it's data, so you can do a lot. You can, whatever you can do with that information and however much information you can collect, like you can report off of that and do a lot.
So first of all, 100% what Ray said. I just want to say everything he said, 10,000% I agree. In the chat, Kellen's saying, in terms of inventory assets, identifying asset owners, responsible parties is seemingly just important and challenging. Yeah, exactly. Kellen, if there's a security incident and you don't even know where the app is, where the code is, a link to it, who to talk to, you're just like, this is the crappiest day I've had in a long time. But if you like look it up, you're like, oh, it's here. And then you can go and like replicate it and test it immediately. And then you're like, oh, who do I talk to? I talk to this person. And then you will call them on the phone or email. Like, your life is just infinitely better. And then Ikechi, because they put in the chat how to say it. Ikechi says, are there any recommendations for inventory tools? And I literally just had this conversation with a client. So I was thinking I might. So there's a bunch of different ways to do inventory, and there's no perfect way. There's no perfect tool. But so there's Asset Note and Bit Discovery. will scan your public-facing assets. So you give them a bunch of your domain names, and they'll try to find everything on the internet that has to do with you or your company. And they can do a pretty darn good job of that. But there's way more than that, right? And if you don't know the domain name of the place, because I have literally found like a co-op student taking their personal credit card and buying some space in AWS and throwing something up because they couldn't get things and blah, blah, blah. Like I've seen this a lot of times. So that's not enough. So other things you can do is find every single person where they work and see if Eclipse, Visual Studio Code, or anything else is installed on their computer that looks like a dev tool. Go introduce yourself, be like, what's up? What do you work on? Could you give me a list of all the apps that you work on, where they are, and information? Then you can use Nmap, everything that's on port 80 or port 443. That's probably a web app. Look in your cloud, see your cloud provider. So I'm an Azure person, like go into Security Center, or even just go like and look at all your resources, look at all your app services. All of those have something, they have a web app or an API on there. Go check out your VMs, see if any of them have 443 or 80 open. That's probably something. Do interviews, like talk to all your dev leads, ask them, then find all your source control. So like if wherever the code is saved, and find all of those and see where those go. And then look at your pipelines. Like if you're using CI/CD pipelines, every single one of them is releasing something, and then put that all together. And then I know that sounds like a lot. It is. It's a huge project, but it's so worth it. It's so worth. Do either of you have anything to add? I know it's a long list of stuff.
I don't know if there's any perfect tool. I mean, like, I'm sure all the tools out there are great, and there's like CMDBs and all kinds of stuff that hopefully AppSec people don't have to manage.
Exactly.
I would say that if this can be pushed off to other parts of your company, I would suggest pushing those off because AppSec people already have a lot of things to do, and making sure that everyone's asset inventory is in order shouldn't be on that list. If it is, like, then like that sucks, but you have to do it. But there's a blog post that I wrote on threat modeling, and the YAML file for that is actually there's a threat models link section, but the first section is actually a service section that captures metadata about the service itself, that has a lot of this information that we're talking about. And that was my idea of how to capture it from like from a build pipeline. You can just send that YAML file to a service that the AppSec team owns, process it, and kind of generate that list. But
I put the link to that article on the screen, but for people who are listening later who can't see it, that's Hella, HELLA -secure, you know how to spell secure, .com/post/threat-modeling with one L -lite, LITE. And that'll bring you to the article. Yeah, that's cool, Ray. I like it. So I was thinking maybe we would go over some of the questions from the back of the chapter. And I mean, they're pretty easy. I'm pretty sure you two we're all going to blow them away. But what are some of the risks of technical debt? Like, yeah.
Pushing a lot of features and making a lot of money.
Okay, so I don't think that's a risk, and that's not automatic. Everyone ignore Ray.
So, I mean, generally you want to address technical debt because, like, from a security reason, because it makes things more secure. But from a good reason why to address technical debt from a non-security reason, just from a programmatic reason, would just be like refactoring your code and stuff like that allows you to fix things in the future or add new features faster. So if you can make your code easier to maintain and read, you're spending less time to maintaining it and more time adding new features. And that can be security features, that can be sales features, or whatever you need to add, right? So the risks are like your code base is unmaintainable, which makes things harder to fix, which ultimately leads to security issues.
I feel like some risks are like if you have really serious technical debt that it takes so long to get a fix out that you're just what's the word? Like, for instance, with Equifax, they had the Java Struts framework, and the version they had a serious 0 day. There was no patch for it. But even when a patch came out, because they had so many systems and they didn't have like an upgrade plan and they weren't ready, that months went by, and it was in those months where they were planning it but couldn't execute because they weren't ready, and because they had so much technical debt because there are so many versions behind, they couldn't address it, and they got hit during that time, right? Erin, what else bad could happen because of technical debt, like besides everything?
Yeah, again, it's almost like a general. Again, you almost look at that as like a symptom, and you see what the symptoms lead to the greater problem, and that greater problem being that there is another barometer that's good to check is the mean time to remediate, right? So MTTR, which is basically what is the average time it takes to get vulnerabilities actually fixed and put into production. And a technical debt basically is a part of the symptom that shows that since the mean time to remediate is probably so high, there's almost like a cutoff point where the time to remediate is greater than the accrual of more technical debt. So there's almost like an arms race of like how fast it is to remediate versus how much technical debt you accrue over time. And it's just a risk of like, again, as it builds up, it just leads to a greater and greater risk profile that something could go wrong. And especially if you have like a bug bounty program, that just gives more possible issues for bug bounty to drain more money from you, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God, yes, Erin. I feel like we could really go all day on that question. So I was thinking we would move to the next question, because literally anything bad that can happen can be caused by technical debt.
Yeah.
So in this chapter, we cover privacy online for software developers, but for everyone, right? And so like, should you post private information on social media if you only have friends who are following you?
You should post whatever you want on social media if that's what you want to do.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's a great idea, but I'm not going to stop anyone from doing it.
Erin, do you have any thoughts on this question that's obviously ridiculously biased?
I mean, obviously no, right? You shouldn't, just because in the case that you don't know how that information proliferates, right? Because it goes to friends, but you don't know friends of friends of friends of friends and where that stuff goes, how it gets shared, and what the actual like access control patterns are when it comes to social media. It's like being able to have here's my analogy I came with earlier today, and I was kind of proud of. Okay. You have a bowl of ramen, right?
Okay.
There's like noodles in it. And being able to map how information goes from one place to another is like identifying two ends of a single noodle in a bowl of ramen. Because you don't. Because when you actually look at like how access control is actually implemented in a lot of social media, Facebook and otherwise, there are so many, it's like layers on layers on layers of access control when it comes to who can see what, that it's like, it's just a maze. So it's almost better just to not, I mean, I honestly stopped using Facebook like a long time ago.
Oh yeah, me too.
So it's just a case of one of those things where it's better just the only way to win is to not play.
I feel like if something's personal, like if you would be upset if it became public, maybe we shouldn't post it on social media. Right?
Yeah.
Like
And
if there's
keep
a
in mind,
photo
like,
of you doing illegal drugs, maybe, unless you're pro illegal drugs and you're cool with everyone knowing that you do that, maybe don't post it. I don't know. Like, I don't know about you, but like way back in the day when I did use Facebook, every few months they changed the policy and the screen would change and they would have opened my stuff again. I'm like, stop doing that. And I personally found that really frustrating. And then I ended up deleting it way before I joined security because I was like, this thing's crap. And they spy on you all the time. And they literally, with all of those leaks with the whistleblower recently, I'm not surprised by it, but I'm still sad. I was really hoping they were just ignorant of the fact that they were definitely like basically trying to increase people's hate. But, we'll just leave that. But I feel like there's just so many ways that things get into hands that you don't even realize. And
well, you're not even accounting for all of their third-party vendors that they just give data to process and do whatever with, and those third parties have third parties that they do business with. So like I don't know. I think you said it right. Once you post something on social media, you should just consider that public, right? Like at a certain point.
That's how I basically approached it. But
I've
noticed that
started
there's
asking permission.
There's a popular tactic I've noticed on Facebook that, and a lot of like my older relatives fall through this, is that people they'll ask like, and I guess they're like pages that get set up, I guess, that look like something else, and they basically start to ask questions that try to basically they're kind of begging the question of like you giving up something private about yourself, saying like, whoa, what was the year you got your first car and what was it? And then people just want to answer it just because it's like they think it's a fun game, but they're basically now harvesting data about you. So now they know, like, and that's a popular secret question thing, right? Well, what year is your first car? What model was your first car? That kind of stuff. And again, for people that don't realize that they think it's just a fun game, that's people just like sharing information about something about their life. And then what's even more nefarious is that people get their Facebook account hacked, and then they go in and start asking that question from the perspective of someone that is a friend. And they say like, oh, what was your, man, I love pizza. What's your favorite pizza topping? And which, again, I've seen terrible secret questions that I say like favorite pizza topping, which only has like a handful of answers.
Yeah.
So even if it's like we're not posting private information on social media on purpose, just do it on accident, or we're tricked to do it.
I remember when I was working at Microsoft. So the Microsoft Blue Badge is really well known. So it's definitely not a secret. People know what it looks like because Microsoft has 500,000 employees and another 500,000 worth of consultants and contractors and part-timers. But I remember I took a selfie with two of my colleagues, or one of them took a selfie, or someone told me they call it an USSI, like a selfie with multiple people in it. But anyway, so we took an USSI, and my badge was in it. I didn't realize that. Yeah. And then they posted it to Twitter. And then a whole bunch of my security friends are like, Tanya posting her badge. I'm like, it wasn't me.
But if keeping a picture of your badge is your security control, that's a rather poor security control, right?
Yeah, but if it's a small company though, where there's only 100 employees, getting a picture of that badge if you were trying to get in could really help. Like it really, like it's security by obscurity, I guess. It's just like another layer or way that we're sharing more information. And just, I guess I want people to think twice before they share something.
But I mean, you could just sit outside that office during lunchtime, and I'm sure people are going to walk out with their badges on, and you can just take a picture of them because they're now in public, and that is totally cool, apparently.
Yeah, I know. Okay, I have more questions. Why are multi-factor authentication rates like of adoption, so people actually using it, so low? And like,
Because
how
it's
can we
hard
make
to
it?
use.
Yeah, what Ray said. But I want to ask the people in the chat, how could we increase adoption? So like, and do you two have any ideas? Because like, other than me telling people about the risk, I don't know.
Authoritarian government forcing people to use multi-factor authentication. Boom, 100% adoption.
Okay, so
I mean, I even wrote down that note to myself and said, honestly, sometimes it just should just be mandatory. Which luckily, I think a lot of the companies and websites that are important do that. Like most banking, I believe they force you to at least do SMS.
We only have 2 banks in
most
Canada that offer it at this point, and the rest you can't use MFA, and it's such crap.
I think offering
Capitalist America
incentives to use it, like if you're on like a streaming platform or a social media platform, maybe give an extra feature if you're using that, right? So people want to use that feature, they have to sign up for it. I mean, I think, but like it all comes down to money, is how you can still make money while keeping it on, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't have a good answer for it.
If they could somehow make it so that turning on MFA somehow makes them money, then there you go. I'm actually curious though, is there actually a figure for the adoption rate? Like, do we know what that number is?
When I wrote my book, a study had been released and it said 15%.
That's pretty good.
But as low as 11, depending on the service.
Is that like just internet users or like individual service accounts? I'm
not sure.
Because either way, that's like 10 to 15% is pretty good if you consider that like most people, like what they use the internet for, right? I mean, just Googling stuff or getting on social media. So I don't know. I don't think that's terrible.
I wish that it was like broken down by what the things were for. So for instance, like if your credit card is attached to that account or not, if any sort of financial. So for instance, like MFA on PayPal, I'd love to see what that is, right? And for the longest time, they just had SMS, and then they got Authenticator app. And so I made a video of how to set it up because I was like really excited. But I find that, I'd really love to see a breakdown. If anyone's watching, if you want to write a blog post, I'll quote you if you do all the work. But I'll share it. But yeah.
I mean, this also goes back to what I said before, is that if we go towards the start to pursue that passwordless way to authenticate yourself, that basically almost has MFA built into it. So it almost becomes the default. And that's how you have to basically approach this moving forward, is that you have to somehow not only remove barriers of entry, but also make it the secure default. Right? So we need to bridge that. I mean, I think most people are going towards the fact that there should just be some kind of general authenticator token or something that you just have with you that just authenticates you. I think Google switched over to that, so their internal employees don't use passwords for anything anymore. Like it's a standard. Once you get hired at Google, you get your laptop and you get a YubiKey, UTF key, or whatever key that physically plugs into the device, and that gives you access to everything. As long as you have the physical token, it gives you everything. But if you don't have the physical token, it gives you access to nothing.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so
how do we make that for everyone? That's the question.
Yeah, I think part of it is going to end up being the people that make the operating systems getting on board for that. And like phone operating systems, computer operating systems, just like, a few chapters ago. So one of the sessions before this, and people who are watching or listening now, like this isn't the only episode. This is episode 9. There's going to be a total of 10. So you could go back and listen to this one. But we talked about how, oh my gosh, of course I forget. We talked about basically how for software developers, making them memorize a zillion different types of vulnerabilities and a zillion different ways to write secure code is really hard. So what if instead we built security features into frameworks and made the easiest way to do the thing the most secure way, like Ruby, for instance, it has, built-in protections against cross-site scripting and against injection and a bunch of other things. Same with .NET. But then you have things like PHP and it's just on fire. Like I went last week I virtually went to one of my client sites, and we're looking through Defect Dojo, which they use to manage a bunch of stuff. And we're digging through the results because I'm just like, I want to see where I need to spend all my time. I have limited time for you. I'm a consultant, right? So I'm digging through. And then finally we got to this part where I showed you the technologies. And 75 or 80% of all their vulnerabilities were in PHP, despite the fact that only 10% of their apps were written in PHP. So I'm like, okay, so when we see those numbers, I immediately know where to spend my time with you because I want to reduce as much risk as fast as I can, right? Because I think I work there like 1 to 3 hours per week, depending. And so I'm like, I'm going to just concentrate on PHP. And they looked at me and were like, well, damn. Right. And it's not that I don't want to do other bigger moves for them, but I'm like, let's put out this fire. And then let's see about making sure every app going forward has better security. But they had all these legacy apps and they assumed it was all the old apps. And it turns out it's only PHP, and PHP does not have. And like, I am a big fan of making fun of PHP, but it just doesn't have that many things built into the framework. So if we can, the concept push left, so start security earlier, but what if we start it before the system development lifecycle even starts, right? Building it into the framework so the devs can't even make that mistake in the first place, take the pressure off them. And so, yeah, Erin, if we could make multi-factor authentication and passwordless services be built into the operating systems and like the tools that we use, that would be my favorite way for us to do it personally. Anyway, I have more questions. What password manager do you use? This is open in the comments to everyone.
I use Bitwarden.
Bitwarden? Cool. Do you like it?
Yeah, it's open source.
Erin?
I've used LastPass for a long time. And it's one of those things
that,
because I've even thought about switching to like 1Password, but it's just like, it's work to do. I mean, honestly, it's not even that much because I think you could literally just export and import into it, but I just haven't gotten around to it. But it's also really important that the organization you work for also has like an official password manager as well, because generally they probably have policies in place that say like your password should not be stored anywhere that's not approved. So if they don't have an approved password manager, you're still ending up remembering them all. I know because I've used like all of my work computers have been MacBooks, so I'll use the OS X keychain that's built in to try to remember some of these passwords.
I have worked at places where they wouldn't allow a password manager, and then they expected. So one of my friends is a scientist. She's a biochemist, PhD, blah, blah, blah. And she works at a place that I won't name in Canada where they make sure all of our drugs are safe. So everyone knows where she works. Anyway, and she said, like, if you go into their offices, there's like 400 different Post-it notes everywhere with every password because they make them change all of them every 90 days. And they're not allowed a password manager. And they have multiple different ones. So almost every week, one of their passwords expires. And she's like, that's the only way we can get our jobs done. And it's so stressful. And if the security team comes in, they're going to murder us. They're going to be really angry. Right. And she's like, but because I'm friends with you, I was like, well, we shouldn't do this. And they're like, how can I remember? Oh, and they generate the passwords for them. So it's not something easy to remember either. And it's just like literally.
That sounds awful.
It's so awful. And she's like, and my staff spend literally measurable amount of time every week on the phone with help desk. And it's so stressful. And so I want to bring us to the next question. So in this chapter, if you read it, and if you didn't read it, it's okay. But like, what security policy at your office makes it hard to get your job done? And did you speak to the security team about changing it? And is there a potential compromise that could be made? So I told her, just go to the security team and tell them from your point of view how hard it is to get your job done because of that. And so when we last talked, she was trying to talk to them about it. What do you think?
I have a lot of these, not just from any particular job, but from things that I've hated at other things. But like DLP agents, so data loss prevention agents, or any kind of security scanning agents on my computer, like it makes my laptop sound like it's a rocket ship about to blast off. I hate web proxies. Like, you don't need to inspect my internet traffic. Like, I'm an adult. Like, if I'm not doing my work, like, there's other ways to measure that. Be a good manager, and like, who cares if I'm looking at like Google News or whatever during the day? Like, that's like no one works 8 hours a day, right?
Or 8 hours straight.
Yeah, exactly. And then also I would say the web sandboxing, like, where I find like in theory it's like super awesome. In practice, it's less awesome, where it's like they pre-render the website for you and then serve it back up to you, and like it's just like, it's crap. Everything breaks, and like the technology is not there that makes it useful.
When I was at DevRay, they made a virtualized dev environment for us, and they gave us 2 gigs of RAM. It takes 2 gigs of RAM to turn on Windows, and it takes another 2 gigs of RAM to boot up Visual Studios, like not Visual Studio Code, the whole Visual Studio. And I was like, so I need at least 6 gigs of RAM if you don't want me to, like, I can't even turn on my system. And they're like, well, that's all we've afforded for this project. And I'm like, okay, so we'll just keep deving on our desktops. And they're like, no, you're not allowed. And we're in a meeting and they're telling me the policy. And I said, what you're telling me is you have a new policy that does not allow my team to complete any of our responsibilities or duties. That's what you're telling me. So should I just send them home? Should we start like a cool euchre club or what? Because I can't do, and they're like, well, I'm like, I don't want to say like you're being unreasonable, but like, you've set us up not just to fail, but it would be like an hour and a half of a dev just trying to start Visual Studio Code. And then we would try to open code and it'd be another hour and a half. And I was like, so we're done now. When you want to come back and be reasonable, we can work together. And they just like were super flabbergasted. And I'm like, I'm leaving now. I'm the queen of the devs, right? Like, I was the super senior person that ran everything. And I'm just like, the devs have spoken, bye. And they're like, what happened? I'm like, they're back to the drawing board. We don't have to do that crap anymore. Sorry, guys. Are you okay? Let's keep doing our job, right? Because like, it's like they hadn't even considered we had work to do. Erin, do you have an example of things that are awful?
I mean, as part of the security team, I generally love security policies, just because it gives me some backing to when I say to do certain things, or I make requirements on stuff. But there's always little things here and there. I had a lot of issues with I was part of an Amazon company, right? But I wasn't actually working for Amazon, so Amazon policies still applied to me, but they were a lot of times very either overly strict or not strict enough. And I remember I had a recent thing where they were very strict on, this wasn't Amazon particularly, but they're very strict on what kind of like image types you can spin up as part of your cloud environment. So like I couldn't just spin up like a more modern, fully updated like AMI Amazon machine image. They only wanted us to use like CentOS 6, and like that was it. And of course, and then lo and behold, the end of life I think for that distro is like either just happened or it's coming up soon. So it just basically made it so that they just pigeonhole themselves into this like corner where now they're like, okay, well, we love using CentOS, but now we either now have to go to like CentOS 8, and and then we had so many other use cases, especially when writing security tools. We just had like all these other use cases that were outside of production, right? We weren't making production apps, but we're still having to follow production rules.
Honestly, like I feel like sometimes it's like the security team can forget what the stakeholders have to do to get their jobs done, and if they're interrupting. Like I helped so I've helped a lot of companies write secure coding guidelines or standards or policies, like a lot of them. And one of the ones I always put in is that secrets must be managed in a secret management tool. You don't put them in the code. You don't save it in a clear text file. You don't save it into databases and fish them out. We use a secret management tool. And so one of them recently, they had me in and I'm like doing some scans. They found passwords all over and I was all upset. And I was like, what's going on? And they're like, oh yeah, so after we started that policy, we went to go buy a secret management tool that's extremely expensive, which I won't name, like extremely expensive. It's going to be like $500,000 apparently. But then they decided it was too expensive. So then it's been blocked in procurement. And like, it's been a year.
Well,
and so they have this policy. Tool. I know. So they have this policy that devs must put secrets in the secret management tool, but then they prevented them from getting it. And then I was about to go give them shit for having passwords in their code when we have given them no other place to put them. And I was like, do you see a problem here? And they're like, well, yeah, but we're waiting. And I'm like, guys, I'm like, do you want me to just find you a cheaper tool? Because I can. I have like a list of them. And so like that's what next week or the week after when we see each other next is going to be about, right? And I'm not trying to be a jerk face or anything, but I'm like, we can't put devs in that situation. Do you know what happens when we put devs in a situation like that? They're like, what? I'm like, they ignore us and we break their trust and they think, well, that's stupid. So yeah, I'm going to ignore this coding policy or whatever else they've put forward, or I'm going to at least ignore part of it. And yeah, guys, because like we made the plan at the same time to get the tool. Right. And then they just didn't ever do it. And I'm like, yeah. So that's the last question for this week or month.
I thought there was one more question.
Okay, there's one more. I was going to skip it, but that's fine. Okay, so in the chapter, I talk about doing fire drills. This is sometimes called a tabletop exercise where you run a fake incident. But it could just be a simulation of anything. So I'm a big fan of practicing. So I give public speaking talky things all the time, and I practice the living tar out of them. So that when I do it, everyone's like, it looks so effortless. I'm like, yeah, it's muscle memory because I've done it 47 times before, sometimes literally, but usually at least 10 before anyone ever sees it, right? And so I believe in I really do believe that practice makes as close to perfect as we can get. And so in the chapter, I talk about like things that we could do for a fire drill. So do you two have any examples of things that maybe we should practice to make sure we get them right?
Yes, I have a great example. Say we're back in the offices again, and a malicious attacker starts an actual fire in your office so they can attack your data center. It will be an actual fire drill.
Oh my my gosh, Ray. I don't know if it's practicing if there's real fire.
Oh no, the fire will be fake if you're practicing it. But you're practicing for the event of a real fire as a distraction to the actual attack going on.
And the simulation is someone that's vaping real hard and making just these big clouds right at the fire systems.
You let all the smokers come in and smoke inside to help with the simulation. They still have cigarettes, and you're like, it's a fire.
Done.
Erin, do you have an example?
I just wanted you to do this question so I can actually use the actual fire drill as an example.
Oh God.
I mean, I generally don't get too involved with that stuff just from my job description, but yeah, we've had it discussed. I mean, generally just a red team is usually a good indicator of like response abilities, right? Because it just comes down to like how prepared is a blue team when it comes to the unknown, right? How good is their monitoring? How good is their response times, right? When something does go down. But a lot of times, sometimes that's pretty broad. Sometimes you want to have a more really specific, like we want to test this specific type of response. But I still think that doing those penetration testings and red team engagements will give you ideas for good fire drills to do in the future, right? They'll say like, oh, well, we found this one thing. It'd be interesting to see how they respond to it at another point, because then we can actually simulate it happening.
And to Aaron's earlier point, like I actually agree with him that like incident response kind of ignores application security, whether they do it intentionally or not. Like maybe they just don't understand. But like a lot of the tabletop exercises have nothing to do with application security, where when you're looking at the Verizon data breach incident response report or whatever it's called, right? Like it's like phishing, and then it's like web app attacks are like is like number 2, and then like everything else is like a far number 3, and like they focus on like either phishing or like 3 to 5, and it's just like, okay, like what about AppSec? Like we're number 2. Why aren't you focusing on that? And I like, so I can't think of a time where I've been brought to a tabletop exercise from an AppSec perspective.
No,
and that's kind of sad.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Yeah. So the Canadian government, so I worked for the Canadian government as a public servant for 13.5 years, and they hold a security exercises summit for every single incident response team across the government once a year. And they run mega tabletop, like hundreds of people, tabletop exercises. And I don't mean to brag, but it is the coolest, funnest training I've ever taken. It was so cool. And they really went over the top for it. So it's run by Treasury Board Secretariat. I used to work there, but I was not responsible for it. I just got to go to it. And they had fake TV announcer videos, and they had all these silly Canadian things in it. Like, they hacked all of the Tim Hortons so there's no coffee, so everyone on your team is sleepy and dopey because there's no caffeine, and like just like all the things, right? And then they take you off of your IR team and put you with random people from other teams. And so they switched us every time so that we could practice, right? And so then one of the times they put me on the team with this lady named Liz, who I happen to know is the head. So the way the government works, I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about this, but it's probably fine. So each department has their own IR team, but then they have the mega parent IR team. And if you can't handle your thing, you get to call in the big guns, and the Canadian government's CERT team comes in, and they're amazing. They have tons of digital forensics and like really, really awesome. And they have their own tools, and like, they're just like better than what I have witnessed in private industry. I was really, really, really impressed with them. A lot of people, we've called them like the jewel of anyway, they're amazing, like totally amazing. And so she was on there, like the head of all of the incident response. And I was like, we've got a ringer on our team. And she's like, don't tell them. And I'm like, Liz is from GC CERT. And they're like, ah! She's like, ruin all my fun, Jacob. It was awesome. She was such a ridiculous badass. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Anyway, so
I just
that was
imagine that
cool.
whole thing as like more of a like when you were explaining that from a like, but I was thinking like you guys were playing some like big Canadian war game with like miniatures, like, and you're like moving across the board.
No, it's like incident simulations, and it's
Yeah.
multiple days too. So that basically, like, it's 2 days of training, and each morning after, so each half day is a completely different situation. And yeah, it was really cool. And then they also have this. So like that's how I learned, that's part of how I learned incident response and then on the job. But then also they have this instant response training where it's like a couple days of training, but they bring in instant responders from other departments, and then they share this super secret information about what's happened and how they reacted and how they could do better. And like when I was a dev, they didn't have anything as cool as that. Like they're just like, go be a dev. Here's an IDE, right? Like, but I switched to security, and I'm like, there's so much cool stuff. And they should have like a dev summit. They have like 200,000 devs, right, across like 200 departments. Anyway, I digress. Do either of you have anything that you want to promote or tell our audience about before we say goodbye? Because we're going to say goodbye soon, and I wanted to give both of you a chance to like do your thing.
Sure. So yeah. I don't know if there's much promoting to be done other than you can follow me on Twitter at HellaSecure. You can check out our blog at hella-secure.com. Don't really have any like events planned, but I'm sure I'm going to try to get to DEF CON 30 next summer. Otherwise you can definitely hit me up on DMs if you have any like questions or need advice or anything like that. So I'm open to chat.
Cool. Ray?
Let's see. I like to promote Sunkiss, Zero Sugar, and Tanya's book. That's all I have next to me.
Thank you.
Hella-secure.com.
Vesta Coffee Roasters in Las Vegas. Great coffee. locally roasted.
Thank you. Coming up, the next and last stream for the book. So we're combining chapters 10 and 11 because there's just not that much in 11. And I'm going to be joined by Nikki Becker. You've seen her on the streams before. We've been friends for 10 zillion years, and she's the person I started OWASP DevSlop with. And she's just ridiculously brilliant. And so she's going to come on December 4th. So we've changed the dates because, quite frankly, my child custody dates changed. And I don't want to have little kids running around in the room behind me. So December 4th is the next one, and it's the last one. And then I guess I have to probably write another book or something. I want to invite every person watching or listening to join the SheHacksPurple community. So if you go to community.SheHacksPurple.com, it's free. It's totally free. And basically, like, people chat there. You get invites to stuff like this. Sometimes you get free tickets. There's a bunch of free tickets to like Austin Developer Week right now. There were free tickets to KubeCon. There's one free ticket to Sector, which I wanted to talk about. So I'm doing my very first in-person appearance, and I'm super nervous, but ridiculously excited to be appearing in Toronto, Canada for Sector. Sector is owned by Black Hat Events. So the people that own DEF CON and Black Hat, they bought the biggest Canadian conference that we've ever had. It's Gigantor, and we're doing a hybrid thing. And so there's a contest in SheHacksPurple community right now so that you can have a ticket for free, which is retail value $1,500. And you get to meet me if you want to, but I guess you don't have to if you don't want to. But if you are going to be at Sector, like, come say hi. I'm so excited to meet other humans. I literally cannot tell you. I'm a bit too excited about it, and I'm going to be there. We're going to be interviewing other speakers for SheHacksPurple. And I forget what else I'm supposed to promote. Nancy usually just tells me she's the boss of me. Everything's better when Nancy's there. I want to thank you two, Erin and Ray, Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge. I met Ray on the internet, and then we met in person. I was like, this guy's awesome. And he's like, fuck, I can't get rid of her. But he tolerates me very nicely. And then he introduced me to Erin. And I was like, oh, these two people are just, they're so generous with their time and knowledge. They really are. And I know a lot of people are like, so are you, Tanya? I'm like, yeah, I agree. But I wanted to point out that these two are amazing humans. They love teaching. They love sharing. And every person that has been on this cast is just like them in that way. So like anyone that you've seen in any of these streams, if you DM them or you tweet at them, they'll be really happy to hear from you. I want to thank every single person that came to this. I want to ignore Ray. Thank you. Thank you to everyone that showed up. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Kellen. Kellen's been at every single one of these, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that guy. Seriously. And so I'm going to say goodbye for now, and I'll see you hopefully December 4th. And I'm going to try to run the outro, and I hope it works because Nancy's not here, and I hope she's having an awesome time at that awesome thing she's doing. And I'll see you all again in a month. Thank you, everyone.